everywhere, and a warm welcome once again to this edition of the Citizens Chat Show. We're streaming on YouTube at Civic Space TV. I'm your host, Judith Atim, and today our topic is unpacking the Balaalo question, political party nominations, and the ripple effect of the Iran-Israel conflict on Uganda. It's quite a packed day, and we're certainly going to find as much time to run through these three crucial topics that I've just mentioned. And joining me to discuss this from my immediate left is Dr. Robert Ojiambo, head of the History Department at Kyambongo University. Always a pleasure to have you on the show, Dr. Ojiambo.
Thank you.
Next to Dr. Ojiambo is Dr. Sarah Bireete, Executive Director, Center for Constitutional Governance. May you also tell us why you're laughing? It must be such a good afternoon on your side. You're welcome to the show, Sarah.
Thank you, and good afternoon, viewers.
Yes. And of course, next to her is Honorable George Odongo, member of the East African Legislative Assembly. Always a pleasure to have you with us, Honorable.
Thank you very much, and good evening, viewers.
We also have with us Mr. Joseph Ochieno, political commentator and UPC Idelogue. Good afternoon, Joseph. Welcome to the show.
Good afternoon. You didn't say that I'm actually one of the UPC presidents. But look, part of the many, but I'm really the only one. But look, people are laughing. I don't know how and why. But one of the things that George did was to bring for us a fantastic Ugandan coffee made from a fantastic place in Kamocha called Omera. There's a fantastic restaurant there. Anyway, that I was there the other day actually. But that was at Omera. We should actually maybe hold a show there one of these days. But at Omera, then we can have the national discussion, but also we talk about our cultures, we talk about our food, we talk about our communities, but perhaps we also talk about some of the very critical topics we're having today. So look, you guys, we're not all about some of this heavy stuff. Once in a while we talk families, communities, realities, education, and we sometimes go to what happens daily in homes and communities.
And of course, those social bits that are closer to our hearts and our homes, hopefully we'll have some discourse on that at a later time. Thank you, Joseph. And last but not least, retired Major Awich, Pollar, Director for External Affairs at the NRM and Advocate of the High Court. Thank you for joining us. You're most welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. Of course, at an appropriate time, I would offer to discuss those workable solutions Africans had, which were deliberately killed by European intervention.
Well, we'll give you just a little bit of context.
Comrade Awich is a cultural leader.
Yes. So a lot of family issues, a lot of marital issues. How do you resolve them using African approaches? We hope to have that conversation at a later time, but that's a discussion that was being had here, a spirited one, I must say, that got us reeling in laughter.
Traditional knowledge systems.
Exactly.
But I'm surprised Comrade Awich is the calmest here. When he was
he is the cultural leader.
When
he
was
supposed to be calm.
was the most combative.
So, well, thank you very much, lady, gentlemen. So let's very quickly, to give you context to the first part of our discussion. You all know that there is this ongoing conflict surrounding the Balaalo pastoralists in northern Uganda. And often this is framed as a dispute between the Bahima and other local communities. But it is also more than just a recent disagreement, as we'll later see. A lot of analysts will tell you this is a clear symptom of fundamental issues which are deeply embedded within Uganda's national identity. And this situation brings to light critical questions about land ownership, about the dynamics of power and vulnerability, the complexities of identity and belonging, and ultimately, the protection of human rights and dignity. The primary fear among the Acholi community, for instance, is the tangible threat of dispossession and becoming landless, and of course, also losing their sense of home and place. But when you come to Uganda's constitution under Article 29(2)(a), it guarantees every citizen the freedom to move, reside, and settle anywhere within the country. And this fundamental right, however, often clashes with the intricate realities of Uganda's diverse society, as we shall be seeing later in our discussion. Also, you have to understand that each social group possesses unique political, economic, and social identities, and this diversity, rather, means that in some cases, a blanket application of constitutional rights can sometimes overlook or even exacerbate existing tensions and distinct community needs. So as we have seen, this issue, of course, touches on profound questions, land identity, the very fabric of Uganda. And our goal today on this show is to explore a number of issues, including the historical, the constitutional, the political, and even the social dimensions of this challenge, and also to seek pathways towards a sustainable solution. And just very quickly, I think I would like to hear the thoughts of my panelists, each of you, on how Uganda can best reconcile its constitutional freedoms with the need to protect the unique identities and land rights of its diverse communities. But perhaps before I get there, maybe Robert, is there a way you could give us just a little bit of some historical understanding or perspective? When you look at this current Balaalo issue, how does it resonate with, or how does it differ from, you know, past internal migrations that we've seen that the country has gone through over the years? Are there historical precedents that, you know, we can also glean from or learn from to help us understand better what we're dealing with in present day?
Yeah, thank you so much, Judith. I think the fact is that all of us where we are, we must have moved to that place or those places through the larger migrations that took time, maybe 3,000, 4,000, 5,000, 500 years ago, depending on which type of people. But I think after some time, some people settled in some places and picked identity of those areas. For example, you will discover that the bigger southern part of Uganda was inhabited by Bantu migrants who came from different parts, and that is the areas of Ankole, areas of Buganda, areas of Bunyoro. And then the northern part was mainly shared between the Luo and the Nile Hamites. The Luo on the other side of the Nile, and the Nile Hamites on the other side of the Nile, coming to Arua and other places. The eastern part of the country is a little bit funny. It's a mixture. We have a number of communities there. We have the Luo, we have the Bantu, we have the Plain Nilotes, we have later Indians during the construction of the Uganda Railway. Indian also settled in so many places there. Now, look, leaving that alone, these migrations have continued, but with now some specific identities of people settling in different parts of the country. Then there came what we called economic migrations, where now people are moving from one place they had already settled, but they are not now migrating. They are just moving around looking for economic survival. And that mainly was due to the economic infrastructure of the country. When the Arabs and other people came, they concentrated in the central part of the country. And that's why they established a number of economic things, introduction of new crops, and therefore farming and other things started happening here. So people started moving from the west and from the north to come and provide labor in these places and trade-related things. The biggest number were people from Kigezi, and Kigezi because of the issues of farming and other issues that were there, land problems. But later, because of the problems in Rwanda, we started receiving, in early 20s, we started receiving Banyarwanda coming as laborers to come and work in these places. And that is where the term of Balaalo started happening. Because they would come, there was a group which would come to do agricultural related activities. Those were mainly from Kigezi and Ankole. But there are some people who came specifically, and for them was to look after cattle. And those are the people later were referred to as Balaalo. These people did not only concentrate in the central here, they went even up to northern Uganda, and that was their job. Remember that time they are not even being paid money. Somebody looks after your animals, And when the animals give birth, you share the calves. You share the calves, and they start also having some animals, and sometimes milk, because there are some societies which are not so much interested on the milk. So somebody would only keep cattle, and the milk that is being milked from the cows is given to the cattle keeper. That's how the term Balaalo came. So the first time, Balaalo used to be people who are looking after other people's cattle. Now, with the introduction of colonialism and then the colonial economy, things changed again. We had now people, there is a land issue. 1900 agreement brings a lot of problems on land. Land is given to a number of people, especially in Uganda here. The rest of the land is left if it is useless to the community, if it is useful to the public. So that's when the land question began. Now these people who are coming start occupying some pieces of land. And if you look at the bigger part of Uganda, especially when towards the northern part of Uganda, you will discover that the majority of the people there are migrants who came from elsewhere, in areas of Gomba, in areas of even Mubende to a large extent, Luwero. That's why, for example, the Bush war succeeded so much in Luwero, because majority of the soldiers were people who had come as a result of 1959 crisis in Rwanda and settled in that corridor, which later came to be called the Luwero Triangle. That's why you find the Kagames. These were children of refugees who were from Changwali, in many parts up to Chiboga, in Luwero. And therefore, they create an identity of a people, who had the tradition of keeping cattle, and they are called the Balaalo. Now, Balaalo, for the first time, even now start owning land. And if you look at those areas of Chiboga, Chankwanzi, up to somewhere Gomba, Sembabule, if you went there and campaigned in Kinyarwanda, people will understand you. And I've seen candidates, when they go there, they have to speak some Kinyarwanda. Now, that goes on until the UPC government came up with an idea that Rwanda is now stable. We need to find out how many Banyarwanda in Uganda and help them to repatriate back home because of the issues. Because people had started struggling over land during that time. So the question begins, and that becomes one of the issues that the current regime NRA built on, because these people look like they are being sent away, and sent away to a place which they said was dangerous, and therefore they easily join the rebellion and fought. And for example, to cut the long story, they fight, they go back 1994, but there is still genocide, so some of them go to Tanzania and other neighboring countries. Now in Tanzania, they didn't have problems until Kikwete came. And during his government, they decreed that people of Balaalo or of Hima origin should go back to their country. Now, they could not go back to Rwanda. They came to Uganda. When they came to Uganda, they started roaming around. They first went to Teso, and the Arrow boys did not allow them to settle there. So they left. They went to Hoima in Bulisa and other places. They succeeded somehow, but still there were some problems with the discovery of oil. Some of them again were displaced. So they move, they go to ranches in Lango. The people there say, no, you can't stay here. These are our ranches. And recently they find themselves in Acholi. And now in Acholi, they come in a new form of dispossession. No, dispossession in this case can be in two forms. In fact, three forms. You can dispose people by force, you can dispose people by mixing with them, and you can dispose people by buying them. They choose to use all the three. They are disposing them either by cajoling them that they are partners, or they dispose them because they have agreed and they give them some money or some cows or something, and they give them the land. And the most important is the actually people are complaining, where you use a combination. There are soldiers, there is money, and there is a lot of things. So that thing has been building up for a very long time, and we are just now dealing with its symptoms.
Thank you, Judge. Major, Sarah, I'll come to you a little later, because I need us to understand the questions in the north, and especially issues of land and so on. And I want to come to you, Major, and then George will complement. And for this particular question, Major, I'd like your insights as a cultural leader, because I know as a cultural leader, you also arbitrate a lot of land issues. And I would like if you could just take us through the evolution of the land tenure system in northern Uganda. How has it evolved over the years to where we are right now?
Land over time became very populated. And Isreal, before that, the land evolution system was that when a community, and normally a clan system, settles in a particular place, they would own the land. At the beginning, of course, they were not cultivating. They are grazing mainly, because they used to keep a lot of animal, cows. So in the grazing process, a community would have let. Let is a grazing area. And so you would have it as a group. It later on evolved to when the capitalistic system of ownership, individuality was coming up, some families decided to have their own let, the grazing. And this is important because some girls, when they would be taken for marriage, they would wake up in the morning, if you're taken at night, to check around whether there's a let. If you don't see any sign of grazing cows here, then you say that, I think I've made a mistake. How will I be married in this place where I don't even see any grazing? Means this boy is poor, there's no cows. So, and there are several songs to that effect where girls have sung and said, Peter or Okello, you have brought me here, but I don't see any grazing thing. So the grazing land becomes later on the owners. Of course, there are public grazing places. But even if you take a little before, the clan ending land would be the last hunting point, where you hunt up to. Where you hunt up to, because there was hunting. That becomes your land. And that is why, for the moment, you have so many sub-counties who speak Lange in Acholi. In Agala alone, there are about 5. And it goes right from Karamoja up to Moro, where Alanya Jacob, the late speaker, was. And Alanya is the language inside. That falls like that. So for them, it's not that they are Bafurchi. They are not migrants. It's just that when the colonialists are demarcating borders found them there. It's not that they went after the border. There was a haggling between the Cholis. The chief then was called Amot. The chief this side of Lango was Adoro, the father of Akena Adoro. So the angle between the father of Akena Adoro and Amot resolved that, no, you put the boundary here, and whichever land is inside, because that was where the hunting ground ended. So those were now become part of Acholi with their land, with the land rights there too. Now, later on now, the grazing land started to be owned. In Lango, there are cases where people have introduced land title. Now, a small land title than Acholi. The normal land title that is surveyed and owned, and you have land title as proof of ownership. But still, there are other areas which have no land title and communally owned. They still have those pockets. But that is bigger in Acholi. And in Acholi, they would call it a clan land ownership. The particular clan, you see the clan system in Acholi is like doors off.
Yes.
Doors off.
Yes.
That's why they hear pa ngadi, pa somebody, pa somebody. The clan system is modeled in the name of a clan leader. So many land you see the land is of pa somebody. Those of this, Pao Okelo, those of Okelo, those of Opeo, those of this. And it is bigger. And incidentally, I am a chairman of a district land board in my district, which is actually Agaro. I'm a district land, so I'm privy to it. So that now becomes land. So you now have big chunks of it, like in Agaro, between Kalong and bordering Karamoja. And that's where the cattle rustlers have been. It could be some equivalent of a district in Uganda or a district in Busoga. The free space land, which is almost equivalent of Namutum or something, is equivalent of Namutum. Free, and there's nobody inside. And those are the kind of lands that bring temptations. Somebody flies in an helicopter and sees, I say, how about this one? I'm seeing, I'm passing in a helicopter and I'm seeing it. But if you tamper with it, then those of so and so appear. Those of so and so will appear. So, of course, also in Acholi, similar hunting culture and grazing area also occupied, developed, and made people own land. But now, also an introduction of land, the ownership, land title, which is prima facie proof of legal ownership, also were introduced, especially by among the elites. But there's also some habit of customary ownership, land title ownership of customary nature. So, briefly, that is what I can comment about the evolving land ownership system, starting from the hunting ground areas to the communal grazing areas, to individual grazing areas, to areas that remain communal, the hunting ground. So you now have areas in Acholi where you can't buy from Otim or you can't buy from Okero because it is a communal land. So if you purport to say Okero sold it to me, he has no right to sell to you because the land is for a group of people. The land is for those of this, those of that.
So then when you see external migrations such as this that we're seeing from the Balaalo into these kinds of spaces, how do they then disrupt these established systems that you've already talked about?
Of course, the disruption at various levels. First, the disruption starts at individual level. Because the status quo is that the migrants have money and the indigenous are poor. So you are kind of having a contractual relationship. Ideally, a contract is between two willing persons of same mind. But if you unpackage this, the contractual relationship is so unbalanced. No. It's between one poor person and a rich person. Which, if you left that contractual relationship in ideal form, it will really destroy society. So it starts in that way. That, okay, it's willing buyer, willing seller, but this one came with a bag of money and the other one didn't. So is it really a willing buyer, willing seller? Is that a fair contract? That starts at that. So it disorganizes at that. To the extent that the thinking was that if you left it to the market price and that freedom kind of, if this is 2025 and you see that the population of Acholi says 2 million, if you left it to market price and you put it 30 years to come, 2052, you could find the population as it is and the land ownership. So the few people would withdraw to a trading center where they are taking warranty, and then the land would have been bought and by the willing buyers.
Who have the means.
Yes. It could appear a similar situation like Nakasongola. If you look at Nakasongola, you find that the big people who have money have bought all the land, then the other indigenous community and some trading center. So that is why that's why the state comes in this case. The state, Museveni now says, no, you remove people in this way. That is not fair. That's when the state comes in to say, is it really fair? So I have said at individual level, you find the imbalance. At a community level also, you have the introduction of cattle there who will interfere with the cultivation. Somebody has poured cows in the village and is eating millet with maize and all that and all that. All that also disorganizes. The third level is to penetrate in the communal land. You are now going to either claim to abort from appeal, or if you are fraudulent enough to use the state to pass it off and fence a communal land, that is it. So the disorganization, in my opinion, is at individual, the alleged buyer, equal buyers, which distorts. Two, at the grazing and the eating crops level. Then three, at the attempt to grab public land, including a government farm, like Ashua Ranch, which is a government farm.
It has been grabbed.
Yeah, you have it. So, and that is why, as maybe at a later stage, that the state looks into it. The state is the arbitrator, arbiter. The state should know that there's law and order in society, and state should give amount. And that's why the state comes and says, I think this is not a fair thing, so remove.
Okay. Thank you, Major. At a later time, we'll interrogate that state response further, whether it is sustainable and long term. George, I think if you would also complement Major, then I move to Sarah, and then I get back to Joseph.
First of all, you see, our land ownership system is premised on the traditional belief that land does not belong to the current generation. We only hold it in trust. That is the traditional thinking around land ownership in the traditional North. So there is nobody who could claim to own a specific piece of land. That's why you see that much of our land is not titled. The titling is now because of the, the current situation where even there has been commercialization of land. But traditionally, our land tenure system is premised on that belief that, you pass land from one generation to another. So, in fact, you would be rebuked if, for example, you sold out land. They would say, I think you are having a problem because you are now trying to disrupt, the inheritance system.
You're robbing from the future.
From the future. So that's really where it starts from. Let me just contextualize the Balaalo question in the North. First of all, in 1990, we had here in Uganda what they call the ranch restructuring, and it happened in Western Uganda, and I think at that time it was Nakasongola. It was led by David Kulkot. He actually led the ranch restructuring program. And during the ranch restructuring program, land was subdivided because there were so many squatters, and there were big landowners. The late Byanyima was a big ranch owner. Current Professor Ephraim Kamuntu was a huge landowner. So they owned huge ranches, and around them were squatters. So government, because now, like what Comrade Awich has just been talking about, understood that there is need for equity and decided that let's do a ranch restructuring. That was the wisdom of government at the time. So there was ranch restructuring, and then land was parceled out. In the process, they also imposed, I use the word imposed, land ownership. Because traditionally, also in the West, we used to have grazing lands, because these were traditional pastoralists. So they grazed their land from one place to another. But that was conceived to be non-productive. So in a bid to commercialize, and remember we are now going into the IMF time, in the bid to commercialize and give value to land, they said we must all have land titles. So the West went into land titling, And once that happened, there were people who were dispossessed, there was a lot of, and compensation went on. And I think it's still going on. There are some people who still feel that the land, the ranch restructuring was unfair to them. In 2013 specifically, in Tanzania, I think then it was President Kikwete.
Kikwete, yeah.
Around the Kagera region, especially, you know, the Balaalo, who had moved from Uganda and from Rwanda and had moved, because these people don't know borders. They had moved and they were grazing in Tanzania. President Kikwete, through an executive order, said the Balaalo must leave Tanzania. And they were accused of criminality, they were accused of being disruptive, and so on and so forth. Whatever the merit of those accusations is, but that was the beginning. So the Balaalo were then sent away from Tanzania. Once they were sent away from Tanzania, they had to look for every pocket of land available to graze their land.
Their cattle.
To graze their cattle. And there began the migration. So the Balaalo that settled in Acholi, for example, are not there by invitation. And I think this is where we need to begin to, interrogate the Balaalo question. I see that there's a lot of sentiment going on around, and they're trying to weaponize identities. But we have got to trace historically so that we can place the thing in its rightful context. The Balaalos that settled in Acholi, in West Nile, in Lango, and so on and so forth, are not there by invitation. They came in, they drove their cattle into those areas, identified areas that they perceived to have been empty lands, and settled in there. When they settled in there, they assumed ownership. Now, if you read the president's directive is very, very clear, and it puts everything into context. He draws a distinction between those who have legitimately acquired the land and those who have arrogantly continued to occupy the land. So there is an occupation. There's a difference between somebody who legitimately comes, negotiates, and we can deal with the unfairness of the process of procurement. But there is also the question of occupation. Now, the occupation is being driven by the imbalance of power between the local people who own the land and the Balaalo. And that power imbalance is in two phases, is in two forms. It is monetary, and it is also because the Balaalo that are there are largely those that are having weapons. So if you have a Mulalo who is having his cows grazing in your land and is having a weapon, you tell me the balance of power.
The weapon in this case being a gun.
A gun.
AK-47.
So you tell me the kind of discussions. So while we are interrogating these issues, I think let us forget first the legal, because I'm seeing people are saying, oh, legally anyone can settle anywhere. Let us look at how did you settle in this area? Are you humble enough to negotiate? Are you humble enough? Or did you impose yourself? That's the difference. That's where there are sentiments right now, because it looks like it is an occupation. So there is a pushback from the community to say, we did not invite these people. Okay? They came in here, and now they have assumed their rights because they have, under the constitution, the right to move and settle. Even under international migration laws, there is what they call the Global Compact on Migration. It tells you that the migration has got to be orderly. Okay? It has to be systematic. It has to be regulated. It has to conform to international standards. It has to be peaceful. So nobody is stopping migration Personally, I am 100% okay with the integration of our Ugandan citizens anywhere. So the Balaalo, for me, are very much welcome to come to the north. And let us do it in a way that is civil, in a way that respects traditional systems, so that you are not disruptive. So the conversation that has got to be going on in the north right now, that has got to be facilitated by all stakeholders, is that we have got to respect the fact that the traditional owners of this land exist. So let's have a mutually respectful conversation, not one that is imposed on the people of Acholi, the people of Lango, the people of West Nile, simply because our power relations, because you have got poor people, okay, who do not have sufficient power in their hands to negotiate, to discuss. So you are imposing on them, and now you're saying the law provides A, B, C, D. Let's not use the law as a Trojan horse to impose our will on people who cannot defend themselves. They're defenseless. So these are political questions. Forget the legal issues first. These are political questions that have got to be answered politically. And that's why I am 100% with the president. He is dealing with it as a political question. And is trying to break to analyze these issues and say we can have a conversation on this. Number one, he has given a directive that those that have fenced their land, okay,
And have water sources.
Nobody should chase your way. But if you are going to carry a gun, look after cattle, and the cattle are moving around and go to destroy somebody's land, and then you don't want somebody to say you are being disruptive, I think that is occupation, and that is the resistance that the people in the north are pushing back and saying we are not going to be occupied in a land that traditionally belongs to us.
Thank you, George. So, Sarah, let me now move to you. George says this is a political question, and the sentiments that we are seeing or reading online about this need to be measured. It's coming from a place of ignorance, for lack of a better word, I should say. Indeed, yes, the law provides for freedom of movement and settlement, but how does this constitutional right then balance against or conflict with, established customary systems, whether it's in terms of land rights and also the right to self-determination for indigenous communities? There certainly has to be a balance somewhere.
Under Article 2 of the Constitution, any law or custom that is inconsistent with the Constitution is declared null and void. Customary land is recognized under our land tenure system in the chapter in the Constitution under land. So you cannot say that customary land is contradicting the Constitution. Under Chapter 4 on fundamental rights and freedoms, yes, there is a right to own property, a right to free movement, but also under the article limitations, the same Constitution says enjoyment of fundamental rights and groups of one person or a group of people should not affect the rights of the others. So the pro-Balaalo movement or migrations are arguing that they have freedom of movement and freedom to settle anywhere. This right should not jeopardize the rights of local people in the Balaalo migrant areas, the right to own land, the right to live in peace, the right to enjoy their customs and customary land, so that there is a balance always on enjoyment of rights, and our Constitution emphasizes the same. So there are questions that we should interrogate, and we've had a very good preamble by the previous panelists. What are the issues that we are dealing with? The first issue, you are dealing with a complicated land system, because customary tenure system is only in northern Uganda. The other parts of Uganda enjoy freehold land and maybe leasehold, where a person can negotiate, bargain, buy, sell, And usually there is a market value for land. The land boards come in and then advise on the market value. There's also sensitization around the matters of land. So we are dealing with the post-conflict community where the Balaalo are taking advantage of vulnerabilities of a post-conflict community. One, you have under the multidimensional poverty levels in the country, it's very high in the region, especially for the grassroots people. So you have somebody owning by birth big chunks of land, and maybe they are short of cash. We have a lot of cash brokenness. It's not because if you own acres and acres of land, you're not poor, but you don't have cash money. So you have these people who have not valued the land, but also you've not respected the land ownership in the area. Because if somebody is to be a bona fide purchaser of land in northern Uganda, you should have bought from a whole family. So land belongs
Clan.
The clan.
From a whole
The
clan.
clan.
from a clan.
Yes.
So is there anybody who can adduce minutes of the clan meeting where a resolution was made that you are now allowed to buy land? That would be the only bona fide purchase of land in this region. Are there minutes? Was a decision taken by all people concerning that land? Did they have to sell and what was the value? And did you pay? That's the only way you can claim to have a good title of land if you bought land. So did this happen in the case of Balaalo? In rare circumstances. When you look at the other issue, we are dealing with a migrant community, presumably from Tanzania. But there are also others. I remember the list of Balaalo in northern Uganda that came out. It had about 3 or 5 ministers and a number of generals in the army. Yes, it's not just the migrant community. There are other people, including ministers, including generals in UPDF. And that brings me to the question of...
Sir, I can give you information. After the Balaalo had gone there, there is a group of people which went to Western Uganda, brokering land in northern Uganda, and they were carrying buses and lorries of people and their cattle to northern Uganda to buy and settle with their cattle. So there are 2 categories, in fact 3 now categories of people there. You have the Balaalo, yes, the ones who are
the migrants
from wherever they came from. Then we have rich land grabbers who have used either money and groups and so on to go and buy their land. Then state agencies like soldiers and rich men.
especially top politicians and generals in the country. They have big chunks of cattle there. You know, when you look at the question of Balaalo being armed, how can a migrant person get armed?
A pastoralist.
We know the cross-border rules. How do you pass a border when you're armed? And you have declared, are you licensed? Did they move from Tanzania with the arms? When did they acquire these guns? And who armed them? So the state should explain the question of Balaalo being armed. Under what circumstances are Balaalo armed? The UPDF Act says there must be registration and accountability of arms. It has been assented to. So can we have accountability of the guns in the hands of Balaalo? How did they acquire them? How do you move from one part of the region to another? You are armed. Are you a policeman? Are you a soldier? Who are you? Are you a private person being armed? Do you have a license? And if you're a private person being armed, unless you are a company, you are not supposed to have AK-47. Private persons are supposed to have pistols. How do you get AK-47? An individual Mularo who wakes up to just roam around with the cows. How do you get possession of the AK-47? I'm happy that now the good aspect of the UPDF Act, if there is any political will to resolve the Balaalo question, must come calling in this question, in this issue of Balaalo. We need accountability for those guns. The other question is food security. The roaming cows have destroyed people's crops. Then they have also seen the argument on arrogancy, which is really not far-fetched with the people who, we also have cows at home, so I know really a bit of how Balaalo behave. So they say that cows come and destroy somebody's crops, and then the Balaalo come with their arms and they're arrogant and they throw around like 20,000. Somebody's big garden has been destroyed. So how do you address the questions of food security for these locals? Then the question of water and the environment. Animals are competing for water, for drinking and home use with cows. How do you explain such a scenario? I know also in the cattle corridor in Zimbabwe, I know one of the issues that we used to question. I hope they've improved because national water went there, but for the longest time, Zimbabwe had the dirtiest water for home use. When they had powerful ministers like Sam Kutesa and others, they were drinking, fetching water from the same places where cattle were stepping to drink. So you have these situations. How do you resolve them? The other element is the question of now the security and the possible conflict. How do you argue with an armed, economically empowered, arrogant man over your rights to land? How? The vulnerability versus the power dynamics. First of all, there's a communication barrier for the people who don't know English. And Balaalo are less educated, some of them. You have people who don't know English, they have money, they have arms, they are there with their cows. How do you argue for your rights? A poor local person with these people. What if they shoot you? The threats. So when you look at the way government has handled this problem since 2017, I think that's when it became really a problem. The president used to give ordinary orders, directives, until in 2021, I think is when he issued the first executive order. The second one, 2023, now June this month, the third one. All of them not implemented. There has been a little of those people have moved. Few people have moved away between the deadlines. But why would government fail to implement an executive order of the president? The first time he issued the executive order, no, the second executive order, we did argue that it's unconstitutional because the constitution envisages these orders to come out in a situation of emergency. But now they are flying like water. They've become ordinary, regular. But even then, when you think that the president wants to emphasize something and give them enough authority, also they are ignored. So why is government ignoring the highest form of emergency communication by the chief executive office of this country? And he's the head of government. Why is his government failing to implement his orders? Is it a political game? Because on one hand, you have ministers and generals who have grabbed land. I think sometime this week, General Saleh moved. Although he did not grab, he had acquired, he had a farm in Ramo. But he has moved his cattle. I don't know which district.
In
One of those districts.
Amoro.
Yes. He said...
His wife had a farm there. His wife.
Yeah, he has a home there. But he said as a whole demonstration that this thing must be addressed. He has ferried trucks and trucks of cattle as a demonstration to show that Balaalo should move. But why are other government agencies ignoring the highest orders of the president? What is the problem if it's not a political game? That's my question.
Thank you, Sarah. Joseph, let me come to you, and I'd like to hear your thoughts about, of course, about the economic drivers and the political interests that are fueling the Balaalo to move into the north. And of course, the resistance that this is facing?
You know, it's a very heavy topic, and after the submissions, fantastic submission by my colleagues sometimes, it's one of those ones you wish possibly you didn't have to make a contribution to, and it's rare for me. But this is a very emotive thing, because it raises so many questions. I don't know where to start from. I know this topic fully. I am a forced migration scholar, but I'm also president of Uganda People's Congress. I lived in this country in the 80s as a reasonable adult. I have campaigned around the Balaalo issue for the last nearly 10 years. I was a witness to, and I mentioned it in this program, I think Comrade Awich was there in 1987, seeing cattle allegedly rustled by rustlers coming from, those cattle would almost have come from Lango actually, because this is the north of Soroti, Notuboy, being driven towards the south. But being UPC, I take absolute responsibility in making a net contribution to the question of refugees and movements of our peoples on the African continent, and so compelling the British government at the time that was controlling Uganda in 1959 to allow the Banyarwanda refugees, Banyarwanda in the broad sense, who are fleeing the genocide there, to come into Uganda and settle in Uganda, and so therefore contribute massively to the generally good refugee policy Uganda has. I was going to use the word excellent, but it's being abused because of the huge amount of corruption and other things. But I also want to take you back that, as Dr. Ojiambo suggests, the NRA war, brutal war of Luwero, was substantially fought by the Balaalo, meaning the Balaalo, who were refugees in Uganda. And they say there's a refugee scholar, okay, including people who came from refugee camps, regardless of the grievances Palestinians don't occupy Downing Street and White House, okay, and they're there who are refugees. Nothing gave the Banyarwanda refugees the right to pick up arms and fight against the democratically elected government of the Republic of Uganda. I thought that as of 1986, we would wake up to realize that as Africans, regardless of whatever happened, would settle. So I did not know that we'd be discussing the refugee, the Balaalo or internal migration questions today in 2025. And in any case, if some of these were the leading people, I reject the idea that today they're making a net contribution as a matter of policies, economic policy, by Mr. Museveni to subdue 1/3 of the Republic of Uganda, using people who were effectively rejects from Tanzania. If President Kikwete rejected these people from Tanzania, why did they enter Uganda and Tanzania is not in the north? How did they enter Uganda? Part of the question that Sarah was asking. How did they end up in northern Uganda? Now, granted, some of these are not Balaalo of Tanzania, of course, granted, some of these are Ugandan citizens. Some of these obviously are not Balaalo per se. Some of these are crooked NRA people who have got attained power. Some may not necessarily be of traditional cattle keeping lot, but they're still NRA. So how did they do that if it was not a deliberate political ploy to be able to do that? Dr. Ojiambo alluded to the idea that UPC, as a matter of policy, chased the Banyarwanda in Uganda. UPC government did not. You cannot produce papers to suggest otherwise. Look, in the early 80s, as I said, because UPC created an enabling environment that the Banyarwanda settled here. Actually, the conflict about this land thing was much more in Angola, ironically, between the Balaalo, Bahima, and other traditional Banyankole. And it was a conflict that some of us, the rest of Uganda, didn't know. It's true that about 1981, 82, there were incidents that involved this conflict in Ankole. Now, if this is the community that today, 40 years later, are becoming experts in occupying other parts of the country, so what lessons have they learned? The incidents, yes, would have involved possibly some UPC people there, but it was not a government policy, number one. And then number two, part of that was the grievances around the fact that people who were doing this and people who were fighting the democratically elected government were Banyarwanda in the bushes, And so that caused resentment. In Ankole, interestingly, he was predominantly supporting. And so Banyarwanda, erroneously, as I said, you can see how these things happen, like the nonsense that Trump expresses about Mamdani in America. So if you bring the identity mix with this, I don't think we have enough time for it here. So that is understandable from that perspective. But that's what happened at the time. It was not a policy. By the time Milton Obote was invoking the word of question of Ugandan citizenship around Mr. Museveni, because I repeat it, okay? It was very clearly a battle in which things have moved from the constitution, from legality to criminality in the bush. And it was a discussion about identity, not only about Mr. Museveni, but about the people predominantly who were with him. Forget about the Gaddafis and imperialists, but also including Kagame. Because one of the things we need to be able to try possibly in future is that beyond resolving of the relevant questions, maybe we need to be able to ask, how did a Rwanda refugee knowingly become head of our security, as Kagame did? I'm putting this basically to contextualize this and really maybe to give us a hint that we need to be able to deal with these things in civility. And I think one of the words that both George and Sarah was referring to was this, the emotive element of this thing. We need to settle it as sober Ugandans to make sure that we do not create new boils that I think, as Comrade Awich says, that may crop up in 10, 20, 30, 40 years later. Quite clearly, my view, George, is that it's not enough that we question, we let go the people who've not fenced off land, from a UPC perspective. And that people who've gone ahead and fenced off land are okay. George, the war in northern Uganda was started by NRA. NRA started, and Comrade Awich has got a different opinion, and I don't really think the subject conversation that 1986, between March and May, when NRA deliberately targeted young, actually men of fighting age. It's on the record. People started disappearing. So sometimes I wonder, and remember that is now the NRA which is mixed, including both Uganda and Banyarwanda and possibly Balaalo. So this actually, who then are brutalized, taken to concentration camps. They spend 16 years. Some of the Ochienos of this world go around the world and beg Museveni's friends to talk peace so that we bring a settlement in the Republic of Uganda. Bring a settlement, a quiet settlement. What actually Lang, Karamoja, and West Nile need is not arrogance of money, some of which is possibly stolen money. These people need to be helped to use the language that is post-conflict environment, post-conflict strategy, pushed by government and international community. So these people, out of their land from everything else, they needed the resources and expertise to be injected in there. So in the very least, to reclaim their 20 years, possibly government needed to be providing them with grants to build ranches. Not some arrogant, dubious Munyalalo to go and become an expert in teaching them how to look after the cattle. These guys are their traditional cattle. They're not long-haul Nankole. For me, I also studied these things in primary school, so we know about these things. So in any case, maybe actually, scientists will come in future and ask whether or not we shall begin having some of these, because quite clearly, it has been suggested historically, and I think the history professors here that look, long-haul Nankole, they do well in particular places. Karamoja go to do particular well. Mohs will tell you that if you don't take milk, maybe for women without prejudice, they'll have particular figures, things like that. So this thing will happen like that. So now, actually, Lango, Karamoja don't need long-hauled Uncle cattle, They need to be helped, to be able to be supported and help because their communities were broken. These guys had cattle, their cattle were stolen. Until today, including Padola, by the way. I've got a file in my home, which is still literally begging the state, out of 35 years, 40 years actually, begging the state to compensate Jopadola, who were pushed out of Luweero, So these are the priorities that need to be done. So the idea that these communities poor, some rich guys come and then you give him money, I think to me is not good enough. We need to be able to take it back. And finally, just think about the sense of arrogance. If the Balaalo, and we understand that's the culture, and as I said, I'm UPC, we are the authority in supporting and helping the Balaalo, and we'll do so in future, But, I think the sense of arrogance to say that because these guys have cattle, Bambi, is their traditions, is their way, okay, give them space. I asked in this program, it is the Karamojong way of living. When did we ever give them a corridor in Busoga? And a matter of government policy, okay, let's help them. Because they're also cattle keepers. So,
The Karamojong are pastorists.
They
are trying to give them iron sheets to settle.
But
why don't they give them to Balaalo?
By the way, Lango, Teso, actually, huge cattle, traditionally. Part of the conversation, I think the guys was this to understanding for politics. Part of this, the continued current conversation about stock, compensation for cattle, restocking. So that stuff has not been done. So no, I think it is deliberate. Mr. Museveni brought this problem in 1981. Mr. Museveni, you brought this problem in 1981. You need to deal with it today. And for some reason, the sense of arrogance, think that, well, okay, we managed them. No, you've not managed us.
Thank you.
You've not managed us.
Thank you, Joseph. I think I'm being told that it's time for us to wind up this session. But just give us a few minutes. I think I need to give Major some few minutes to respond. You also would like to, just very few minutes for everyone. And then, of course, my last question to close this conversation would be, of course, what your perspectives, each of you, on that single most critical step that we should take as a country, to resolve this Balaalo question once and for all, whether it's a political question or the economic or otherwise. But you first.
Maybe I could first submit, so that because I need Awich's responses on this topic.
Sure.
There are two issues that are really quite suspicious from the part of government. One was the attempt through Ministry of Finance to provide money for all Balaalo in Acholi to make sure they purchased land. Government policy. The other government policy that is really suspicious is also an attempt through Ministry of Lands to ensure that Balaalo are enabled to get customary land titles for the land they have.
Which is basically what I'm saying, yes.
So the people of Acholi need to press this government on the spot to establish their agenda, because the flip side of this is that in the next 5 years, the Balaalo community will be half dominant in the regions they've occupied. And they might take over the politics. In 2031, you might find half of the MPs from Acholi are Balaalo. So the people must interrogate the political agenda. And lastly, there are mineral resources in Acholi region. Specifically, Amul, Ramok, Tugum, deposits of marble, deposits of gold, deposits of limestone. Could it be an agenda, a speculative agenda, to occupy land that has mineral deposits, so that at the time of exploration, either these people are heavily compensated or they benefit from royalties? These are the questions that must be debated. Maybe we need a conference, an actual conference.
Thank you, Dr. Sarah.
Another conference.
Yes. My response, first of all, of course, to the congressman, that it is absolutely not true that under NRA there was any cows driven from Lango to the south by NRA. I just urge the viewers to ignore that.
I saw it myself.
You didn't.
I
It's
did.
a lie.
We don't tell. Comrade Rich, don't use that word lie.
It's okay.
No, Comrade Rich. No, Comrade Rich, I do not tell lies. And please withdraw that word.
It's a lie. It is not true. It is not true. So, that is my short response to that, because I am an actor in it. I was in 9th
I was there.
I was in 9th Battalion, and I knew everything which was happening. Now, on the
Look,
issue
look. If you don't mind.
on the issue of
No, Comrade Rich, if you don't mind.
Joseph, we could ask them respond and then you go.
No, I have to say this. Comrade Rich was an actor. I was an actor too. Comrade Rich was a child soldier. But I was an adult of sound mind. I was in Makere University at the time. I saw this with my own eyes in Otoboy. Comrade Rich, I know you've challenged this before, but you can't call it a lie because I saw it with my own eyes. And by the way, this program can have this program can organize a program. We can organize a delegation and go for a fact-finding mission in Otoboy.
Major, please
I
carry on.
was an actor as a combatant in 9th Battalion. You were
So we
an
need a
actor
judge
as
here.
who? You are an actor as who?
We need a judge. We need a judge.
You are an actor as an observer.
These ones now can't.
I was an actor as a soldier in 9th Battalion. You were an actor as who? As what?
So it's obviously very interesting. You've got so much interest,
We need a
Comrade
judge
Rich.
here.
You're so Awich is so biased because it was self-interest. He was a soldier there. But I'm not accusing you. I'm accusing NRA. And Museveni, but the truth is, you guys know the truth is this. Museveni cannot challenge what I've said. And I've said this before in programs with Comrade Awich. Museveni cannot challenge what I've said. And they've never challenged it, by the way, because it's a fact, you know?
Joseph, you've been hard, but could we just give Major enough time without interrupting him?
The other
Just-
aspect I
let's allow
wanted to
him
say is
respond.
that at a governmental level, or even if you put it at a party level, there's no proven ill motive to this Balaalo question. What is alluded to government now is either inability to execute a position taken or a weakness in the processes of implementation. But there's no proven intention of the settlement of Balaalo. Now, what I want to pick up is that I have had members arguing on this market price, constitutional right thing. And I think I should add my voice that even in law, as we have always said, to every general rule, there's an exception. If the general rule is that hearsay is not admitted in court, there are exceptions that will admit Rugambo. I have always illustrated this, that if somebody was crying in the other room that, Mr. Peter, you are killing me, and we go there and find the person in blood, court will admit that exception. That yes, it is Rugambo, but since he has died, we shall admit. Therefore,
it is qualified and corroborated.
Yes, so I'm calling on people who think that there's freedom to buy and freedom to move to exercise some exception in this particular case, that we don't apply it, because the economic imbalance, the fact that the community has come from the war, does not subject equality in buyer-seller. So I'm urging them to give an exception to this case, that it shouldn't be applicable, that you're free to do it. I gave the example of the 30 years from now. If you take a population now of the Cholis of 2 million, and you take the current population of Balaalo, say of 5,000, and 30 years, you find that the population will indicate that from the 2 million in 2025, population will cut back to 200,000, and the population of Balaalo has gone to, say, 1 million. Would it be a fair? It is an existential threat. It is an existential threat. And that's why I'm saying those who are arguing on the constitutional provision, freedom of settlement, freedom of doing this, should give an exception to this rule. And therefore makes me go to General Saleh. General Saleh has said, even if I have it, even if my lady, his wife hails from the place, his wife was a lawyer, they were really their citizens, their indigenous community. But Saleh is saying, despite all this, I am pulling out and I want others to pull out. So I think from the approach Saleh has done, please let us not exercise this constitutionality and the freedom. Let's give an exception to it. Let us not allow and let us also refrain from it. On the contrary, I like to, with pain, support my congressman's position.
Good.
With a lot of pain.
Good man, good man.
With a lot of pain, support the position. That, you see, in family law, I think I've said it before, in family law, the law provides that if you find a woman with a child, rather than say that that woman doesn't have the capacity to look after the child, remove the child, the law provides that empower the mother to look after her child. If you have a custody quarrel with a man who produced with you, Judith, it is not enough for court to say, since Awich is rich and Judith is a poor mother, pick the child from Judith and give to Awich, the rich person. The court will actually go ahead to issue an order to count my salary and pay to you. Empower the mother. Therefore, if there's any bit of argument that these people are poor, the land is idle, let other wealthy people take it. Please apply the family law principle. Empower the landowners so that they are capable to use their land. And that's why I'm saying I'm at pain to agree with the congressman.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
So I could end that at this stage.
1 minute for you, 1 minute for him, and then we take a break. 1 or 2 minutes, okay.
Okay. You know, President Museveni, this week, I think, he wrote a very good piece on the Iranian question.
Which we are going to talk about later as well.
And I want to quote his letter as the chairman of the non-aligned movement.
Yes.
He says, the habitual mistake makers, the British imperialists, in the person of some wonderful man known as Lord Balfour, in 1924, offered the Jews Uganda as a homeland. Imagine the absurdity. The Jews wisely refused the ridiculous offer and insisted on Palestine, where they had a historical legitimate claim.
Bring it home now.
The Balaalo question, again, let me insist, requires wisdom. This whole conversation that is steeped in constitutionalism, identity sentiments, and trying to drive a wedge between communities, the Acholi versus
others,
has no place. What we need to do as a country now, and I think the state is doing it right, is to admit that the people of Acholi are the legitimate owners of that land and should therefore be given the space to determine how they would want to relate with those who would want to settle in Acholi.
The Balaalo question should be looked in that context. Do not impose the Balaalo on the people of Acholi because it's financially, you have the financial need to procure the land, because probably the Balaalo are armed and therefore they can protect their animals. You are going to sustain animosity between these two, which is not called for. What the people have been saying is that let us have a mutually respectful conversation and agree on a win-win position. A win-win position where it's a negotiated we arrive at a negotiated position.
But if you impose, I can tell you that it may not end now. You are going to begin, by the way, we are just recovering from a conflict that took over 20 years. And people are still having post-traumatic stress disorder. It is not far-fetched to imagine that those kind of things are being rekindled in the minds of the ordinary citizens. So we have got to be extremely careful. These are very delicate matters. Matters of land. This is dispossession of one's ownership, heritage, identity.
Yeah.
You know? So it has got to be handled in a very, very, very careful manner. That's why I'm saying that forget this. Use wisdom. Use exceptions to the general rule, like what Comrade Awich here is talking about. And let's have an open conversation with the traditional leaders in Acholi, with all the other stakeholders in Acholi, and all these other affected people, and come out with a win-win solution.
Thank you, George.
Yeah, finally, it is back here. You know, I did my terminal studies on land question in Uganda, but the concentration was in Bugisu and Bukedi, but of course, spilling over to other parts. My argument still is that we have a huge land question. One of our ambiguous laws is the Land Act of 1998, which was amended several in 2007 and so on and so forth. And up to today, we still want to amend it, but still, this does not solve the question that we have always had. We have several land tenure systems which have started contradicting themselves. You have a freehold, you have customary, you have freehold, you have leasehold, and therefore this is a recipe for conflict in many of our places. You are now looking at Acholi, and the discussion today is pointing at Acholi. I just gave you an example. The people of Chiboga, the people of Chankwanzi, the people of Mubende have already faced these problems and a number of Bunyoro areas. Major was just giving an assumption. Major, go and check today, the assumption has already been made. In these areas I am talking about, if you don't campaign in a certain language, you don't win an election. In Chankwanzi, in Chiboga, in Mubende, you are hearing Kabanda. Kabanda speaks Runyankore and Luganda, and in fact he says he is from Ankole. You remember a man called Mwate Kamwa? He stood in Mubende and went and stood in Bushenyi, and he won
now
both.
He's running in Imbarara.
Now he's running in Imbarara. That man is multinational. So it has already happened in areas of Luwero. If you went and checked land titles in Luwero, you go to the offices in this place, Bukalasa. If you went to Bukalasa and checked the land titles, the owners of the land, some of them live in Rwanda. Some of them, they have land in Uganda, but they live in Rwanda. That's where they have gone back to their country. So we have a huge land question. Number two, I have always heard when the Acholis politicize this matter of land, people accuse them of being sectarian. Ignorance, in my view. This is what forms the question of the day. You cannot just have elections where you are talking about water, I don't know what, UPE. Land is a livelihood. It should be one of the issues that people in Acholi right now, somebody who does not talk about how they are going to defend the land of the Acholi people, should not be voted. Look at the elections in the UK. Look at the elections in America. When they are campaigning, they are talking about issues of identity. They are talking about issues of commerce. They are talking about issues of employment. In Uganda, we campaign on who is going to give you a shirt, sugar, soap. We leave real issues. These are issues that should be in people's manifestos, then pushed into policies, then policies are enacted into law. So in Acholi, I don't want to, those who are blaming the Acholi for coming up with an agenda of defending their land is because they are ignorant. And it should be allowed everywhere. It should be allowed everywhere.
They're either ignorant or got interests.
I want to tell you,
ones blaming
people
them.
have to choose how to govern their resources.
We need to move fast.
The colonialists in 1956, 57 came up with the titling project, and they gave pilot to Kigezi and Bukedi. Kigezi accepted, and that's why you find the land in Kigezi was titled, most of it. In Bukedi, they refused because the people in Bukedi were on customary ownership. They said, we cannot understand this land where they put pegs. The colonialists, as forceful as they were, they would come and put those pegs in the morning. In the evening, they would remove them and throw all of them. Some people even had to be imprisoned. Had to be imprisoned. And that's why, for example, where I come from, the locals know the boundary of the land, and you cannot pass even by a meter. They tell you, no. You have gone beyond the anthill. That's where
the landmark.
So what I'm saying is that the land question in Acholi right now is a mixture of things. For some of you who are scholars, we are even interrogating whether it is not a planned move. Whether it is not a planned move. There are documents speaking to that, where that land has been identified, and that is now the method. You know, land in Uganda is stolen through many ways.
Him that you are crying.
They start with squatters. If
We
you
need
have
to-
seen in
we need to wind
Kampala,
up, Robert.
they start with squatters. Then when you are removing squatters, then the real land grabbers come. So don't get shocked that these Balaalo are just a precursor of huge land grabbers who are sitting somewhere watching.
So
Thank
cows are just a landmark to
Thank
mark
you.
the land.
Thank you very much. Let's take a break, and then when we return, we take a look at the second part of our discussion today, which is, of course, the undercurrents in our political parties and what this means as we count down to 2026. And also, but we'll talk about that very briefly because we discussed the political party issues last week. But I would need us to move also very quickly and then look at the implications of the Iran-Israel conflict on us here in Uganda. That's after the break.
Devices and telecommunication networks. Digital rights include a right to freedom of expression, information and communication through technology, a right to privacy and data protection, a right to credit for personal works, a right to universal and equal digital access, a right to identity, a right to anonymity, a right to be forgotten, and a right for protection of minors, among others. The state's digital rights are frequently violated through various unfair actions, for example, blockage of websites and social networks, theft of credentials, unauthorized use of people's data for personal gain, privacy intrusion, online censorship, arrests and intimidation of online users, internet blockages, and the proliferation of laws and regulations that undermine the potential of technology to drive social, economic, and political development worldwide. It is hence every citizen's responsibility to respect rights of other digital users and to speak out or report to the responsible parties when one's rights are violated.
Welcome back from the break, and glad you're still with us here on the Citizens Chat Show. We're still discussing the issue of unpacking the Balaalo question, the political party nominations, and the ripple effect of the Iran-Israel conflict in Uganda. And in the second part, we'll run just very, very quickly over the undercurrents within our political parties and pretty much what has changed since the last week that we were here. And I think I'll just give Major just very quickly to just take us through, and then the rest will just make a comment or two, and then we move to the Iran-Israel conflict. What has changed since the last discussion we had within the ruling party, NRM? If you could just bring us up to speed. The last time we were here, I think about 2 million people had shown interest at the various levels. What have you now zeroed down to in terms of the numbers?
Not much has changed. We are just implementing positions that are there. By the time we met, the figures were indicative because those were people who had picked the form. So why I'm saying this implementation now is because they are bringing back the forms. So we are just implementing, meaning therefore that no change in numbers. But briefly, we have more than 2 million leaders from the grassroots to up, with 3,000 vying for the position of member of the parliament and chairman LC5. And we think that is so good for us. It shows the popularity of our party that is loved all over the country. I know for a fact that some parties will have to beg Ugandans to kindly hold their flag, and majority will decline. And yet for us, ours, they are fighting and dying. The only change that came up within that time that we didn't meet is that there was election for special interest groups by electoral commission throughout the country. And our ruling party won on average by 89%, on average nationally. The percentage was reduced because Lango, for some reason, pushed us back to 76%. It was the worst performed in the country. But in Buganda, that we thought we would lose, we won, including Magere, where the president of Loop lives. Our youth won all the positions in youth, and there was no rigging. And if there was, at least there's no evidence from the opposition parties. So we won the special interest group of youth, of the elderly, of the disability, yes, and which other group? Those are the ones. Yeah, those are the ones. What it means in effect here is that we shall dominate all the council. For example, the National Youth Council, it will be dominated by NRM. And the 5 members who represent the youth in parliament, we shall win it. Unless if we wish to give it away, but we are not going to. Because it means, therefore, the composition of the electorate to elect the 5 youth at all levels of the country will be 89% NRM. I just like to thank ourselves, including myself and Odongo, that we have talked, and we have talked right among the interventions. But also remember, there's economic interventions in terms of implementing the manifesto, which really touches the people and brings food on the table. And we have stuck to our manifesto, and it is felt. So, on Saturday, our chairman, President Museveni, will be coming to pick nomination form. If you want, I can invite you to come and witness. He's picking the form to express interest. He's going to express his interest, like many have been expressing their interest.
Sarah, would you like an invitation?
Yeah. So I can invite you to come and witness.
I am informed enough to pick a part of my
No,
choice.
but you will come as CCG because
To observe.
To observe, yeah.
To observe how our chairman, President Museveni, is going to express his interest. So that will be on Saturday. On Saturday. Okay. So really nothing pretty much apart from the addition of the election of special interest group, which we take it serious because this was grassroots level. So for those who were doubting when we said it's a mass party and the people are with us, see that. And therefore means that we shall also win by that percentage.
Thank you.
Maybe, well, it is within your discretion, but I could have forgotten something and Comrade Odongo could add.
Okay, so I also just remembered when you were submitting the opinion polls that have been running on the New Vision starting Saturday. It gave the president 73.3% of the vote. But I'd just like to hear your thoughts generally about the credibility or even the margins by which, it is projected that the president will win, starting with you, Mr. Ojiambo.
Before I give something on the opinion poll, I just want to say the youth and interest group elections were an absurdity. and it continue to be something that is absurd. Why? Its method is archaic, marred by a lot of problems, knowing very well that this is the biggest number of our population now by statistics. We need to do better. And for me, I want to suggest to the government that they do two things. Either they allow people to elect through adult suffrage, which is properly organized and manned, or they remove it. Because I saw Comrade Awich chest thumping, they have won 89%. Of course, that is a huge reduction from the previous elections. Before this election, they were winning over 99%, because the other parties would not even participate. At least this time, we are happy that other parties participated, but the returns have not been good. There is interference by state agencies in these elections so much, especially in urban areas where they think that there is some element of electoral knowledge. The DSOs, the MISOs, the ESOs, and these groups, if they could just be pulled out of this election, because May thought DSO means District Security Officer. And this is an election where people are voting their candidates. You will find that there was influence from registration to nomination and so on, which is not good. Number two, they are teaching young people bad manners. I was seeing reports on TV where people reach elections like in Kansanga and many other areas, and they find being told that election already entered, and there is even a return, sort of a fraud. And you are dealing with the people of 19, 20, 25, 26, the beacon of our society. You are teaching them that you can fraudulently change marks and you write wrong marks and so on. It's a very bad thing which should be avoided. I really want to appeal to the Electoral Commission that it is not good to carry out these fraudulent things, and we continue giving Comrade Awich a chance to come here and just come on something which was done badly. We really feel that that is bad. Then opinion polls in Uganda, I have not yet believed in opinion polls because we don't have experts to do it. It's like these predictions of soccer. If you ask an Arsenal fan who would win, he says Arsenal 3-4, even without knowing whether his team is good. Our people don't believe in, and they have not yet believed that you can have your mother, but think that the other mother is stronger than yours. So opinion polls here are not something to go with, because all the opinion polls we have had, I have not seen something. There is no accurate opinion poll, but I have not seen something to accuracy. In most cases, if it is the New Vision, what do you expect? Very soon, Monitor is going to run theirs and will show a different thing. So Wakida, you remember Wakida used to be the boss of opinion polls here, and now he's a candidate.
He's a helicopter candidate.
I don't know how now he's going to carry out, because I used to tell people that Wakida's opinion polls are not correct, because Wakida is a promoter of NRM. I think now you have seen. He is now a candidate of NRM, deceiving people that I'm an economist, statistician, but he was a project. He was a project of NRM. So I really don't believe in them. For me, what I want is the Electoral Commission to put in place good environment and the people vote. If Museveni wins, let him win without people being beaten. Let him win without people being killed. And others, as we talk, Judith, people are still lost. We have people who got lost in 2021. Up to today, we have never known where they have gone. There are people who are in prison because of these elections, and they were picked in Kalangala campaigning. Then they were told that they had bombs, You have seen this bomb thing which is appearing in town. I've been telling people this is bogus. It is childish. These commando films that we used to see when we were still young. Why are people doing this thing in a country where they know that people are well informed? These women, they are shooting here and there, here with the bombers. Now Uganda have turned out to be women. This woman disappeared somewhere in Kenya and is killed in Kaleru here.
She was missing in Kenya?
Yes,
she was
and
kidnapped
in that place. Then he is found dead in Kaleru, that he has a bomb. Please, this rubbish should stop.
You know, I want to pick it from there. For the first time, NRM government is alleging bombing without showing the bombs discovered. Previously, even when some people had doubt, saying they manufacture bombs and come with them, at least they would show you that here we have detonated the bomb and you see it. But this time they are killing people. I have not seen any single picture of the detonated bomb. Munyonyo, you killed the woman. Where are the pictures of the bomb you disabled? Karere, you killed the woman. Where is the picture of the bomb she was carrying that you saved people from? Why are you killing people and not showing us the reason for killing? One, it's extrajudicial killing. Because if you have detected a bomb, we have devices for detonating these bombs. Why aren't you using them? You arrest these women, you take them, they face courts of law. If you want to take them to court martial, they are back. Take them. But why are you killing them? Extrajudicial killings are criminal. You went to the bush to fight extrajudicial killings. Awich, you were a child.
Allegedly.
Yes. Extrajudicial killings, vote rigging, whatever. You are doing worse things than what you alleged you had gone to fight.
Opinion polls.
Yeah, if I come back to that. I don't believe in New Vision opinion polls. They called me the other day and I told them, one, their figures are ridiculous because even when Museveni was still very popular, he never got to the percentage they are showing. So where is it coming now that his ratings are very low and it's common knowledge, even him he knows? So what sample size are they using? When did Museveni last score? I think his highest was about 65. 75 was the very first election. After that, you went 60, 50. Now you are struggling there at 55, 50 plus 1 if you get it genuinely. So where is 73 coming from? When did you last score that? It was just in one election. In 1996 when you threw stones at the Paul Kawan, Semogere with his 1%. So from then you have never been in the 70s. What is the sample space? It is not correlated at all with the analysis and trends of elections in Uganda. And I did ask them, the journalists that called me, I told them their figures are weird. They are outside the known trends. You know, a genuine poll, and we have seen them in the involved countries. You just see 3 polls in the involved country and you know who's going to win. In Uganda, they are not at all related to the trends of elections, both official results of electoral commission or known trends of political issues in the country. And I think I want to stop it at that.
Thank you, Jared.
But I want to briefly, youth elections. Youth elections were an embarrassment to electoral commission and the country. We are a few months away from the general elections. The youth completed the register and they've been telling us they have a digital register. The president has been saying these elections must be digitalized. One, they had handwritten register. The reason they were rushing the deadline for voter register, they said they want to prepare registers for special interest groups. In Kawempe, they had the handwritten fake register. In other areas, the youth would come and they say, here we have finished voting. That's what happened to opposition, that you are just standing, you defeated. Time for voting, of course there is no voter education going on. But people would come 7 and they say, here we have finished. So did you vote in the night? After midnight? What time did you vote? I think real electoral commission, you are lucky that the youth did not lose it and stone you. But if it had happened, I think you would have called it on yourselves. you really screwed up the youth elections.
Thank you. George, yes.
Well, I'll not comment about the bombs because I'm not a bombs expert. On the statistics that have been generated by the New Vision, until I look at the sample space and the tools of analysis, it's difficult for me to comment, but congratulations if the NRM has been scoring very, very highly. Now, youth elections have consequences. I participated in youth elections, and
This one.
no, not these
When
ones.
was
When
it?
I was
When you were young.
When
Yeah.
he was a youth.
When I was younger.
yeah, and I was a member of the National Youth Council. I was in UNSA, and why I say youth elections have consequences is because when I look at our generation, I see that most of us are playing a critical role now, both in government and even in the opposition. Because our time, I can say we had people like Todwong was there, Rose Namayanja was there, Major Awich, what's the other guys? Kidega. Then we had people like Frank Tumebaze. I can list, and now when I go to Parliament, I can list over, I don't know how many members of Parliament that came from that generation of the youth councils. Now, this is how important youth elections are. And therefore, the quality of our youth elections has a direct bearing on the quality of leadership going forward. So we must really, really make sure that we take keen interest on how we organize these elections and how legitimate the outcomes of elections are.
Thank you.
So for me, this is my point, that we must take keen interest in these particular elections because they have a direct bearing on our governance, on leadership, on the quality of the country we want to have in the future.
And your thoughts on the polls?
You did.
I already did mention.
Sorry,
Yes.
Joseph.
Just quickly, on the question of political parties, I think partly because we don't have time. My view is this, that like Sarah said, I think until we go through a transitional process, there is nothing genuinely representative which is going to come out of our elections, regardless of the outcomes of coming elections. All I can pray is that the next elections takes place in an environment far better than 2021, and that particular young people don't die for nothing unnecessarily. I'm also still very concerned that I thought would actually be campaign matter, and if I was advising people like particularly NUP, that they are really not bringing out. No wonder sometimes some people talk about some of the things that would be controversial. Me saying, I'm quite surprised that Dr. Ojiambo is saying that the matter of missing citizens, young citizens, is not on the table. Merely right now as a part of a campaign thing, let alone campaign from all of us really as a national activism thing about our citizens. Earlier we were talking about Balaalo, and some of those Balaalo things have got sentiments about history, about conflicts in other countries, conflicts in this country, people dying and things like that, and we're trying to look for solutions and try to mitigate whatever these things happening in future. So considering the history of NRA and considering what happened in 2021, we're not having these conversations enough, and I'm not surprised, therefore, that it's very difficult to predict what's going to happen in future. I just returned from West Nile via mainstream northern Uganda, and as you know, I engage variously at every stage, including at petrol stations. And amazingly, the number of young people that you meet, and they're either indifferent or ignorant or have given up, is huge. I met a young lady, and I will give credit to PFF, because within my local area in Kampala, and she was supposed to be a candidate. And it's extraordinary the experience she had, going through young, fantastic young, private school teacher here within Kampala. And shockingly, as George says, youth emancipation is power. This is the foundation that built Uganda People's Congress, the foundation that built many of us, the foundation that built Museveni et al. And just like George said, within one generation of NRA. It's the foundation that has given NRA semblance of hope in terms of fantastic young leaders as they would. So primarily common sense, except of course the moment, it's much more sort of interest-driven rather than anything else. The space for young people to actively engage, and Sarah, the organization does fantastic work, including this youth roundtable, inter-university debates, and others. Substantial. If you then go to schools, my own experiences, my mirror, I don't know what is happening there. If you go to schools, and then you go to post-secondary institutions, and then you go to universities, and then you talk politics. I was telling a television network the other day that I'm actually genuinely surprised, for example, that there is no student group, if I missed it, because I've got issues with my social media systems, my phone, that I don't know of any particular organized youth movement, student group, for example, that has taken position on the Iran issue. When I was one of the two deputies to leading a demonstration in 1986, against Mr. Museveni's regime at the time, over the death of Samora Machel. And we're saying as university students that after the Boers had killed Samora, it had taken 3 days for government not to say anything. And we're saying that no, our government needed to say something, And Museveni actually issued a statement the following day. Number two, Sarah, we went out to demonstrate against America when they bombed Benghazi, and again, we're university students. Now, that was sort of really years when Gaddafi was extremely unpopular here, because Gaddafi supported Idi Amin. But our students were simply saying that no, that is an attack on the territorial integrity of a sovereign nation state and on the continent of Africa, and that's imperialism. So at the contextual level, you think, why? Because those are the use and those are the thinkings that is going to inform the leadership that comes from the Georges et al. Going forward. That is going to make sure that this country and this continent creates leaders who are able to stand up to the dual bullies of the Trump nature that emerges out of America, or the possible Trump equivalents that emerge somewhere in Northern Europe, but particularly the African nationalists and nationalists in a constructive way, that are able to redirect the continent in a direction in which politics should be for young people. Or the poll thing, I think like my colleague said, another here and there, but opinion polls in stable environments are extremely important. In fact, opinion polls, when legitimate, they actually influence the direction of policy, because policymakers in government, policy strategists in opposition, political parties, and actually active civil society organizations use public opinion, because public opinion, public perception, to take positions and direction, including how to lobby. In this country, if you go to where I came from in Zombo, and when you go through to either maybe cross averagely in Agago, and then you find always sometimes some corners of Shema. I'm not quite sure whether average citizens are taking many of these other things seriously. So meaning civic education in this country, Sarah, you guys who run ahead these organizations, you've got a huge amount of work, but at the end of the day, it's the job of political parties and organizations like ourselves, but also enabling environment created by government.
Thank you, Joseph. So now very quickly, I think in 10 minutes or even less, let's just move to the Middle East now and look at the Iran-Israel conflict and what it means to us. George already earlier mentioned President Museveni's recent letter in which he articulated Uganda's views on the conflict. He also emphasized the need for dialogue and mutual recognition, which pretty much is a stance that reflects our non-aligned principle and commitment to that. Also bearing in mind that he's the chair of the non-aligned movement. So just very quickly, for a Ugandan watching us, just like you're saying to the young people who might be detached from some of these realities, why should a conflict 7,000 kilometers away from home be something that they should actually be anxious about? Very quickly.
I think I want to begin with that comment from George, and this is where I tie very tight knots with Museveni on that issue of Israel, Palestine, and the war in the Middle East. I have always liked his engagement. He's one of the leaders in Africa who have been very, very clear and consistent, which is good. And there I associate with him, and I like his engagement. In fact, if he could handle all the other matters the way he normally intellectually handles such things, we would be very, very far. Looking at that,
And he's on all issues.
no, others he really he jokes
Happy
a lot.
man.
But this one, if you read Yoweri Museveni's scripts, ever since he was a student and is looking at the issues in the Middle East, he normally engages very deeply.
Yeah.
The way he used to do with apartheid in South Africa and many other things. But when we come back home here, sometimes he is neither here nor there. But number two, I think Africans should get concerned with what is happening in the Middle East. Because when you look at the Middle East, is one of the richest continents in the world, especially when it comes to oil and the other things like nuclear and so on. But it has been so much characterized by conflict. There is no period in time that since 1948, when Israel was formed, that you will have that area, either it is Iraq versus Iran, then Jordan versus the other one. Of course, in the last 50 years, Israel has dominated. And Israel does so because it's a proxy of many Western powers, especially United States of America. I don't think people were surprised when Trump, who was an isolationist, who said he will not participate in these wars, he is now interested in the Iran-Israel conflict. But the Iran-Israel conflict is just an extended policy of exterminating Palestine, because majority of Palestinians had run to Iran and they have been followed there. The issue of the nuclear is just an excuse. Major Awich knows that for you to fight, you must get an excuse, because there is no country that makes nuclear weapons in this world like North Korea, but nobody attacks them. Instead, you see that leader of theirs having engagement with the United States and things end there. But suspecting Iran, you remember Iran is one of the Middle East countries that had tried to isolate itself from the policies there. That's why you find that she is not very friendly to many of those countries. And it has been an ally of the United States for some reason.
Thank you.
So I think we need to look at it carefully, because already Iran, things which are happening in Iran, for us they are happening on us differently. Just the introduction of GMOs in this country is an equivalent of the same process that they are using to exterminate some people in Palestine and others. For us, they don't need to fight us. They just bring you avocado and you eat, and you will surely get cancer and die.
Sarah.
Yeah, maybe just briefly on the war on nuclear weapons.
But also, if we could look at the economic impacts, the potential, and also trade relations.
Yes, briefly, if you look at who has nuclear weapons and who is it that when they get nuclear weapons, then the boys who play in the big league get uncomfortable. We have about 9 countries not possess nuclear weapons. And they fall in 2 categories: those under the Non-Proliferation Treaty and those who are outside it. The Non-Proliferation Treaty, which came into force in 1970, requires official declaration of nuclear weapons use, and then of course sign up not to threaten other people. The countries which fall under this, and they were recognized before the treaty came into force in 1968, they are United States, Russia, United Kingdom, France, and China. Then those who fall outside it, these are countries which are not recognized under the Non-Proliferation Treaty. And they include India, Pakistan, North Korea, Israel, and others. Others are not named. So these countries are not bound to develop or not to develop. They are not required to declare to the International Atomic Energy Agency and so many. So that's why North Korea is not threatened with its nuclear weapons the same way Iran is threatened, because Iran is a member of the Non-Proliferation Treaty. So Iran has officially no confirmed declared nuclear weapons. It has enriched uranium, but also close weapons of grade levels, but claims to be of peaceful intent. That's energy use, basically, alternative uses of nuclear energy. So when it comes to the threats, the current war threats, basically there is a war in the Arab world, of course the Palestinian question, and I don't know whether the president, as the chairman of NAM, spoke strongly on the question of Pakistan, the way he is speaking about Iran. I somehow I could have missed it, but I missed a strong voice of non-aligned movement, because the non-aligned movement used to be, a strong rock for the protection of the rights of the people in marginalized states, like Pakistan, that is seeking recognition. It's recognized at the UN General Assembly level, but is not fully independent state, and the question of two-state solution. I know the president has been firm on that, but I somehow thought that the message of non-aligned movement did come out strongly at that time. Briefly, since we don't have time, what are the implications? Iran, before Trump brokered the peace accord, and I hope it is still holding, but by the time we sat to record this show, it was holding. So Iran had closed the export of oil, and Iran controls 20% of the global oil market. So a war in Iran will have implications on our fuel prices here in Uganda. And that's why citizens should be interested, among other reasons. Yeah, so I just wanted to point out that, and I'm mindful of time. I hope we'll have time to discuss.
The Iran-Israel war should be looked in the broader context. And it should even include the war between Russia and Ukraine, because the common denominator is America. America has overreaching influence in the Middle East and within NATO. So looking at it, we have got to look at the geopolitical realignments that are taking place. America has moved from its some of its geopolitical positions, and is now has moved away from soft power and is projecting hard power, and is using that leverage, to influence the world, and it's acting alone. As of yesterday, just to give you some context, as of yesterday, the leaders of NATO, that includes Europe and America, and of course and Canada, yesterday had a meeting in Holland, and they had to recalibrate their commitments, because initially, you see, under the NATO treaty, Article 5, an attack on one is an attack on all, and the key guarantor of peace, security and stability in Europe is America. But then Trump happened, and once Trump happened, Trump has caused a reset. So Trump has pulled the rug below their feet and exposed Europe. And because Europe has not been putting in sufficient resources to build its defense capabilities, now they have been forced back to their initial 5%. Ambition of 5% of GDP to build their capabilities, because they're anticipating that, what is happening in Ukraine can spill over to Europe. And there are geopolitical realignments, because Russia now is more inclined to China, North Korea, and all those countries that they are considering in the American speak rogue nations. So And you see, there is now a new, how could I call it? There is a new model that Trump has introduced. It's called the mineralization of peace and security. So you negotiate on the basis of your minerals, on your oils, and so on and so forth. And he has come here. Now I'm trying to
offer.
Exactly. So now, what you see happening is America trying to project power in a different way, and it's going to be hard power. It has ramifications because even as we speak today, Rwanda and the DRC are in Washington.
Good example.
Okay, to sign a peace deal, which is largely driven by American interests on minerals. So you are seeing the influence of America and the remodeling of American foreign policy. So we have got to be interested as Ugandans, as Africans, what is our capacity? What is our, what they call the geopolitical capabilities to deal with the overarching power of Europe, of America, of China? You know, what they call the great power competition, which is finding expression in interest in oil, interest in, you know, minerals, you know, trade, influencing trade relations. Kenya has just signed, against the EAC treaty and protocols on trade, has signed an EU partnership agreement with the European Union, totally disregarding the existing trade protocols that prohibit a partner state from going to trade with another using completely different terms and conditions that, you know, go against our commitments as a region. So we have got to be interested in the war that is happening in these countries. It is a very subtle way, and yet it's coming into our countries.
Yeah.
So you are going to see soon an invitation of, already we have seen that there is already, China has already invited African presidents, African leaders, for the, what they call the what?
The
China Africa Summit, in which they dangle a certain amount of money as investment in infrastructure and so on and so forth. China is trying to establish itself in Africa. That is an invitation for America to react. You know, that's an invitation for America to react. So what America is trying to do is simply to say, I am resetting, okay? We are resetting our international position as the global leader. And therefore, all of you must be worried and should know that if you do not play ball with us, there are consequences. You know, there are consequences that come with it. So we have got to be extremely interested. And people who are sitting down in our foreign policy, in our ministries of foreign affairs, should have actually a lot of time to do some kind of geopolitical analysis, to look at what are the trends and how do we recalibrate our foreign policy to be consistent with the realities and the moving landscape in our global foreign policy environment, so that we as a country can be strong, but also as a region. As President Museveni usually says, what is our center of gravity? For NATO, it used to be America. Now that America has moved away, they have realized they must run ahead and put in place resources to build their capabilities. Because now power is projected using military capabilities.
Thank you.
Just to build on from George's perspective, actually, for me, the view is actually not about foreign affairs. It's actually common sense. If you're an ambassador and you do not appreciate some of these global basics, then you don't deserve the job for which we pay you. I think for me, it's very much about fundamental, about waking up by governments. And again, come back to the young Africans. You know, we must reclaim our countries, reclaim our continent, reclaim our resources, invest in education, invest in health, invest in infrastructure, invest in technology, invest in opportunities and possibilities for our researchers and others to make sure that we've got capacity to build bombs of tomorrow, but also to build electric equipment of tomorrow, and to make sure that we build electric bridges of tomorrow, and to make sure that we're able to build electric palaces of tomorrow up on air, because that is the global reality today, meaning power on the basis of what it is that we really have on the table. Now, unfortunately for Iran, since the revolution in 1979, when they overthrew American stooge, the Shah, you know, the Americans have never calmed down, and that's what happens in Africa. With the dropping off of the Shah, these guys tried to use Saddam Hussein. Saddam Hussein, like Idi Amin, turned up against them. But yes, of course, the 20% of the Iranian oil, these guys wanted to control it. And of course, now it came into the hands of guys who are not necessarily friendly, and they're Persians, but most importantly, they are actually Iranians looking from the inward interest that Africans also need to make sure that we look back. That's why I'm saying that actually people must make sure that they protect their land, and if they have oil, that land must be, the oil must be theirs, and if the oil is theirs, the oil is Ugandan, the oil should not be for Popinati. Now, Iran threatened on, has got this influence on the Gulf of Hormuz, which is basically the major strait for the shipment of most of the commodities from the other end to the global north. Extremely important. It's not influencing global north, but it will influence trade with us, including generally the prices of goods and services in various ways. But finally, of course, Iran, beyond the revolution, humiliating America with the Shah of Iran, like the way Somalis humiliated them in 1992, they dared to be now the people who take a position, and they realize now the more apparent buffers and bankers of the Palestinians. The most common thing down there is the Arab-Israeli conflict. I think, as my colleagues really said, since 1948. The Arab-Israeli conflict is something that should really have been resolved a long time ago. Museveni refers a little bit into the letter. When the time came for the conversation around the two-state solution in Israel, that was the most commonsensical thing. The Americans woke up to the reality, especially after the death, the official death of the Cold War. Yasser Arafat of the PLO recognized Israel, the right for them, self-determination for both sides, and these guys to live side by side with one another. And Israeli Prime Minister emerged, thankfully, by backing of Jesus. And Israeli Prime Minister, in the name of Yitzhak Rabin, came up, a war general who came and simply said that way.
Jesus.
Yes, and I'm saying it for a reason. Came up and took a position. He got elected. He was the most decorated war general in Israeli history. Becomes a prime minister, and becomes the prime minister of peace. Goes on to do these other things, but guess what? He's assassinated by a Zionist extremist. And of course, that comes the death of it. And now the right-wingers in Washington, the right-wingers, the name of the Netanyahu's are ruling. Anyway, quickly, because of time, Mr. Museveni's letter. Mr. Museveni's letter is an expert letter of a history student of global reason, but not an expert letter, not a letter from the chairperson of the non-aligned movement. He wrote seemingly about, like himself, teaching the world about what he knows about the conflicts there, rather than as head of NAM. And finally, if it was as head of NAM, he should not have responded as head of NAM in response to a complaint by Iranian ambassador. He should have written as chairman of NAM. And non-aligned movement, as Sarah said, it's a common sense thing. It needed to have come out much earlier, much more emphatically, and raise the issue of a global threat as it was. But fair enough, it was a detailed history.
Thank you. And I'll not take parting shots, because I'll consider this as your parting shots. Major.
Yes. The issue before us is Iran, but I don't know, you forgot about me during some other session. On the polls, New Vision, yes, it is correct. Only that when it comes in favor of us, some people don't want to believe. Just like a court ruling. If it is a rule against us, the justice is prevailing. If we win, there's no justice.
You have cheated.
So there's two. On the question of bomb, I thought the bomb thing in the Catholic thing was found. Also, I think the one of Kaleri, so I don't have facts about it, but I thought they had shown it. So I end that at that. Now, about Iran, when Comrade Odongo was reading, I already printed my copy, because my chairman of the party has written, so I take it serious.
Our president.
Well, for me as a party director, I take it more as chairman. So I have this copy, which Odongo was reading.
How does it start? Read the first sentence.
The cover is a statement by His Excellency Yoweri Kaguta Museveni, President of the Republic of Uganda and Chairman of NAM, 2024-2027.
Read the first sentence.
The first sentence says, citizens of the world, my name is General Retired Yoweri Museveni of the Resistance Movement of Uganda and President of Uganda. I'm also Chairman of NAM until 2027. You want me to continue?
No. Supposing he loses the election.
So, So this is it. Now, first of all, I like to say that on this matter, the Israel question is a question that has really led people into disinformation. And I kind of heard from him when he said some Jewish prime minister came with the support of Jesus. No way! The guys don't believe in Jesus.
They have
I was emphasizing a
1.92%.
point.
They don't believe in Jesus.
Yeah.
Two Jews that the Jews don't believe in. They don't believe in Jesus Christ because Jesus said is the Messiah. For them, they said they don't know that Messiah. They're waiting for their Messiah. And they know Jesus as the son of Joseph. This guy who was making timber at the other corner of Jerusalem. Who is he? But these Christians have been misled into thinking.
That's my point.
That's
my point.
They have nothing to do with Jesus. The other Jews that the Jews have really thrown away is Karl Marx. Karl Marx by far is a genius, but they don't believe in Karl Marx. The reason that Karl Marx argued on class interest, that Karl Marx believed in the workers, the capitalists, the what. For them, they want to be taken not in terms of class, but as a chosen people of God. So
they don't believe in the Bible.
How can Karl Marx reduce them to class?
Why do they want to be chosen people of God? Yet they don't believe in the Bible.
I recently met one, and he was actually director of external affairs like me. I met him in India.
You believed in God?
That, yeah,
1.92%
So they
of
believe
the
in
Israelites.
the supreme
they believe
God.
in
Yes,
it.
they do.
They believe
may
that they are
call
God
it
chosen.
differently, but
So there's that misinformation, especially on the Christian aspect.
Yes.
I really want to emphasize to the viewers that the Israelis, the Jews don't believe in Jesus.
They don't believe in your Jesus.
Your Jesus. Forget about it. Now, I thank my chairman for going through the detail, because many people don't know that, and maybe people don't even know why they are called Zionists. The Zionists is because when they were looking for places, they wanted an identity, and in Palestine there was Mount Zion. So they call themselves going back to Mount Zion. So that is why they are called Zionists. And if they were to come to Uganda, they would have, because they are given them Karamoja, they are going to call themselves the Mount Moroto. They are going to be called the Morotos, because the mountain that they would have identified. The mountain that they would have identified is Mount Moroto. So, but the Zionist thing is Mount Zion, which is referred to in the Bible, but there's a small mountain there called Mount Zion. So they said they're Zionists, going back to Mount Zion. Now, this really shows no injustice in the world.
no justice.
No justice.
No justice. Yes. These guys attack Iran, they bombed Iran. First of all, claiming there is a weapon, which there is no weapon, and they even have the audacity to say, "Please don't reply. We have bombed you, but
don't retaliate.
What kind of injustice is this? No weapon, you bomb somebody, tell him not to reply, should keep quiet, and what it is. But that is an injustice. But we know that we live in a world where matter continuously exists and it is in constant motion, meaning therefore that everything will change. Ottoman Empire was here for 500 years and there are no more. So changes will occur. We live in a global village, and this global village will automatically change at some point. How long it takes, nobody knows. This now brings me to the effect. The effect is that because we live in a global village, the war in Iran will affect us, including medicine in the pharmacy, including the cost of food. It has such a multiplier effect that all of us will be affected, including the Americans. No amount of cushioning will help them. So it is better that we have a peaceful world than having a world which is not peaceful, because all of us are affected. It will affect everybody, including food on the table.
Maybe let me just reinforce that point that you see, Iran has been accused of outsourcing violence. You know, they have what they call the axis of resistance. And the Houthis, you have these Houthis, and America recently in Yemen, and America recently has been bombing the Houthis. And the whole thing is that the Houthis are targeting a supply line.
Vessels, yes.
Okay? And that reinforces his point. That supply line stops movement of goods outside of
the Persian Gulf.
The Gulf. So all these other, Ukraine has been supplying us with wheat and so on. So you are going to have higher prices of goods that are imported into Africa. Africa is a net import. Imagine that we import 80% of the food we consume. Africa. That's how bad the situation is.
I'm going to have a problem with my chapati.
Lack of leadership.
And so on. So this war has implications. And as Awich said, because now it's going to disrupt. And I think that's why America quickly said we should disable Iran, with the perception that Iran is the key facilitator of this. They have outsourced violence to these other small groups like the Houthis and so on and so forth. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you very much to you all. And I'll take that all as your parting shots. We've had an interesting and engaging discussion. We've been unpacking the Balaalo question. We've also looked at internal party dynamics as parties undertake nomination of candidates. And also now, lastly, the ripple effect of the Iran-Israel conflict. What does it mean to you as a Ugandan? Thank you very much. My name is Judith Atim. Special thanks to all my guests. Dr. Robert Ojiambo, Dr. Sarah Bireete, Honorable George Odongo, Mr. Joseph Ochieno, and retired Major Awich Pollar. Thank you for your insights into today's discussion. This is the Citizens Chat Show. We'll be back next week, same time, to join us. Follow us on all our social media platforms, subscribe on this channel, and also drop us a comment. Tell us what you think. Be part of the conversation. Until next week, bye-bye.